She had no intention of falling asleep, and definitely not on a stranger. But that stranger turned out to be the beginning of everything she'd ever dreamed of. The subway station buzzed with life. The sounds of screeching rails, humming fluorescent lights, and distant conversations all blurred together as Amelia Locke adjusted the strap on her worn-out bag. Her day had been long, draining, and full of disappointments, the kind that made her wonder if moving to the city had been a mistake. Was her third month working at a boutique publishing house, the kind of place that paid little but promised exposure. Amelia had started as a hopeful assistant editor, but most days she felt more like a glorified coffee runner, an inbox cleaner. Still, she stayed, because dreams needed some amount of sacrifice. That day had been particularly rough. A pitch she spent a week perfecting had been torn apart in under 5 minutes by her boss, a woman with a voice that could slice through steel and the empathy of a stone wall. It wasn't personal, she told herself, but that didn't stop the sting. She took a seat in the crowded subway car, letting her head lean back against the cool metal panel. There was barely enough space to breathe, let alone relax. People were pressed shoulder to shoulder, lost in their screens, their thoughts, their exhaustion. She clutched her manuscript notes tighter, her one shot, her one idea that might save her career and prove to everyone she wasn't just another intern with a liberal arts degree and too many dreams. As the train lurched forward, she closed her eyes just for a moment, just to breathe, just to escape. The wrong shoulder, her head drifted slowly to the side. The man sitting next to her stiffened slightly. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, the kind tailored to a body that didn't have time for fast food or excuses. His wristwatch shimmered with understated wealth, and his shoes had that polished perfection that screamed control, success, power. His name was Jason Crane, and he didn't like interruptions. He was reviewing board minutes for a potential merger deal when he felt something soft press against his shoulder. He turned slightly and froze. A young woman with chestnut brown hair had unknowingly nestled against him, breathing softly, completely unaware of the world she had slipped away from. His first instinct was to shift away, gently nudge her back to her own seat. He had meetings to prepare for, calls to take, emails to ignore, but something about her face made him pause. There was weariness in her features, not the kind born from laziness, but from the relentless pursuit of something just out of reach. He sighed quietly and let her sleep. 20 minutes passed before the train screeched to a halt. Jason nudged her gently. "Miss A, I think this is your stop." Amelia's eyes fluttered open, confused, then horrified. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." She quickly sat upright, her cheeks flushed deep red. I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." Jason gave a small shrug. "You looked like you needed it." His voice was calm, even kind. She stared at him for a second longer than necessary. He wasn't just wealthy looking, he was composed in a way that people twice his age struggled to be. The kind of person who made rooms go quiet when he entered. "I thank you," she managed. Jason nodded. "Take care." And just like that, she stepped off the train, manuscript in hand, her heart still racing. She'd probably never see him again. She was wrong. 3 days later, Amelia was called into an unexpected meeting at her office. "You remember the manuscript you submitted last week?" her boss asked, not quite looking at her. "We're passing on it, but there's someone who saw it and wants to meet you." Amelia blinked. "Saw it?" Her boss tossed a business card across the desk. Amelia picked it up slowly, reading the clean lettering. Jason Crane, CEO Crane, House Media. Her breath caught. The man from the subway. Jason had found the manuscript on the seat after Amelia rushed off the train in panic, forgetting the folder entirely. Something made him pick it up, open it, read the first page, then the second, then the entire thing on his ride home. It was raw, passionate, flawed, but brilliant. He knew talent when he saw it, and something about the girl on the subway wouldn't leave his mind, not because she leaned on him, but because she had something most people in his world had lost long ago. Amelia stood in front of the skyscraper that housed Crane House Media, her fingers trembling as she pressed the elevator button. This was not how things were supposed to happen. Opportunities didn't fall into people's laps, and CEOs didn't read subway manuscripts. When she entered his office, he looked up and smiled lightly. "You fell asleep on the right shoulder," he said. She nearly laughed. "I'm still so embarrassed." "You shouldn't be. I'm glad you did. Sit. Let's talk about your story." That meeting changed everything. Not just her career, not just her confidence, but her entire understanding of how dreams unfold. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't shout. Sometimes, it whispers, and if you're tired enough, it might just speak while you sleep. Asterisk. Amelia couldn't sleep that night. The city outside her window buzzed with neon life, but her mind was louder. She kept replaying every second of that meeting. Jason Crane, the man from the subway, the CEO, the person who against all odds read her manuscript and saw something in her that no one else had. She kept wondering, why? Why had he cared? Why not just toss the folder into the nearest trash bin? She didn't have answers, only questions. And now, she had something else to an email. An official one. Cranehouse Media wanted her back for a follow-up. This time not as a visitor, not as a girl with a forgotten folder, but as a writer. The word itself felt foreign. She had been writing for years, ever since she was 10, and wrote stories in the margins of her school books. But no one had ever called her that before, not with any real weight, not with intention. And yet, that email changed everything. When she arrived the next morning, the office felt different. She wasn't there for coffee runs or paperclips. She was escorted to the executive floor, a place interns whispered about but never entered. A receptionist with a headset and a calm voice directed her to the glass-walled room overlooking the skyline. Inside, Jason stood by the window, sipping something dark from a ceramic mug. The city was behind him, glowing in soft morning light. He turned when she entered. "Amelia," he said. "Right on time." She nodded, nervous. "I didn't want to be late." He gestured to the seat opposite his desk. "I read your story twice." She blinked. "Twice?" He nodded. "The first time was curiosity. The second time was because I couldn't stop thinking about it." She wasn't sure what to say. Praise always caught her off guard. Years of criticism had trained her to expect the opposite. "You have a voice," he continued. "Unrefined, yes, but alive, raw. It reminds me of something I forgot a long time ago." She tilted her head slightly. "What's that?" He paused, looked away for a moment. "What it feels like to start with nothing and still believe you can matter." Her heart caught in her throat. Jason sat down, the quiet between them comfortable now. "I want to offer you something unusual," he said. "Not a job, not yet, a chance." She leaned in, listening. "We're starting a new division, digital storytelling, long-form narratives. Think real stories told with cinematic flair, emotion, truth, grit. We need people who write with fire, not formula. I want you to write the pilot piece." Her breath hitched, but she hesitated. I've never been published." He raised an eyebrow. "Everyone who gets published was unpublished the day before." She smiled at that, despite the nerves. "There's more," he added. "You'll be shadowing me for 2 weeks, observing meetings, pitches, strategy calls. I want your piece to show the reality of this world, not from the outside, but from inside the fire." Shadowing him, her palms instantly went clammy. "Why me?" she asked again, softer now. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "Because you remind me of someone who fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder and still woke up ready to fight for her dream. That did it." Her eyes watered, but she blinked it back. He noticed, but didn't comment. "Do we have a deal?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, we do." When she walked out of that office, she wasn't the same girl who had stepped into it. She felt taller, not because anything had changed outside her, but because, for the first time, she had been seen. Not just noticed, seen. The days that followed were surreal. She shadowed Jason everywhere. Boardrooms filled with powerful voices, creative sessions that sparked with energy, conversations about funding, ethics, brand image, and audience targeting. She scribbled in her notebook constantly details, reactions, raw thoughts. But what fascinated her most wasn't the business, it was him. Jason Crane was a paradox, controlled but curious, sharp but kind. He had an eye for opportunity, but never forgot people. And the more time she spent watching him, the more she sensed something underneath the polish, something cracked, hidden. He would laugh at jokes, but never fully. He would compliment people, but rarely accept any. He was a man on a mission, but what haunted him was not where he was going. It was something behind him, something he never talked about. And then came the moment she didn't expect. 3 days into her shadowing, he invited her into a smaller meeting, just him and 2 other executives. The conversation turned heated. There were debates about direction, risk, expansion. At one point, one of the execs made a remark that was clearly intended to undercut Jason's position. Jason didn't flinch. He leaned back, thoughtful, calm, and then he said something Amelia would never forget. If you're afraid to take a leap, that's fine. Just don't block the ones who are still brave enough to jump. The room fell silent. That's when she realized Jason Crane wasn't successful because he played safe. He was successful because he remembered what it was like to be the outsider, the underdog, the kid with nothing but borrowed hope and a worn-out notebook, just like her. After the meeting, Amelia asked him something she'd been holding in. You didn't always belong in rooms like that, did you? He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. I fought my way into them, and now I open the door when I can. That night, she began writing, not because she had to, but because she couldn't not. Her fingers flew across the keys, pouring everything she'd seen, heard, and felt into the story. She didn't try to sound clever. She didn't edit every word. She just wrote about power and pressure, about masks and silence, about what it costs to keep believing when the world keeps whispering that you're not enough. She wrote until the sun came up, and when she finally read it back, her chest tightened, because for the first time, it felt like the story was writing her. Amelia sat outside the glass-walled office, clutching the envelope against her chest like a lifeline. Inside, it was her story, 21 pages of truth, pain, and raw observation. Not just about Jason, not just about the company, about everything. She had written it in a state of fire, of clarity. But now, as she waited for Jason to return from a board meeting, doubt crept in like a storm cloud. What if it was too honest? What if she had said too much? The door behind her opened, and Jason stepped in. His expression was unreadable. His phone, still in hand, without a word, he held the door open and motioned her inside. She took a breath, stood, and walked in. He sat down and finally looked up. Is that it? Amelia handed him the envelope. He didn't open it. Not yet. Just held it for a moment, studying her with that same piercing calm he always wore when something mattered. How do you feel about it? He asked. She hesitated, terrified. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Good. That means you told the truth. And then he began to read. The silence that followed was deep, heavy, not uncomfortable but full. She watched him as his eyes moved across each page, his brow occasionally twitching, his jaw tightening, softening, tightening again. He was still, for a long time after he finished. Then he closed the folder, and said nothing. Amelia braced herself for criticism, for edits, for a suggestion that she'd tone it down or clean it up. Instead, he looked at her and said, You wrote what no one else would have dared to. Her breath caught. It's going to shake people, he continued, especially the ones who live behind glass and call it success. She felt her heart lift, but only for a second. Are you ready for what that means? He asked quietly. I think so, she replied, though her voice cracked. Jason nodded slowly. Good, because there are going to be people who hate it, who hate you, not because you lied, but because you didn't. She didn't answer, because deep down, she knew he was right. The next day, the manuscript was sent to the editorial review team, but what neither of them expected was that someone would get to it first. 3 days later, an anonymous blog post appeared online. Rising in turn blows the lid off. Cranehouse culture, a dangerous truth hidden behind power. The article quoted passages from Amelia's story. Not the polished version, not the one Jason approved, the raw draft, the one still on her desk, the one no one should have seen. By noon, the entire office was buzzing, people whispering in elevators, screens turned slightly away in cubicles, eyes on her when she walked down the hall, and then Jason called her in. This time, his expression wasn't calm. It was unreadable but darker. I need to ask, he said. Did you leak it? No, she said, instantly, heart pounding. I would never. I believe you, he said before she could finish. But that didn't make it easier. An internal review was launched. The article was taken down, but not before it had been shared thousands of times. Rumors were everywhere. People were nervous. Investors had questions. Jason was under pressure, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he brought Amelia into the conference room the next day for a meeting that wasn't on her calendar. To her surprise, the room wasn't filled with executives. It was empty except for one person, A woman in her 50s, silver hair pulled into a sharp bun, eyes like polished steel. "This is Alina Ward," Jason said, "head of Legacy Publishing. She's read your story." Alina gave a single nod. Amelia's mouth went dry. She'd heard of Alina, a legend in the industry, a woman known for launching careers and ending them just as quickly. Alina folded her arms. "That was brave writing." "Thank you," Amelia said quietly. "Bravery comes at a cost," Alina replied, still steady. "What you wrote, it's not just a story. It's a challenge, and challenges force people to make choices." Amelia wasn't sure what she meant until Alina leaned forward. "You're not invisible anymore," she said, "which means from now on, everything you write will be watched, praised, or picked apart. You're not in the shadows. You're in the fire now." The room was quiet for a beat. Then Alina stood and looked at Jason. "She's got the voice," she said, "and the guts. Just make sure she doesn't burn out." With that, she left. Jason turned to Amelia. "Do you understand what this means?" She did. That her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was a spark, and sparks were dangerous in dry rooms. That evening, as she left the building, the city felt different again. Bigger, louder, less like a place she was surviving in and more like a place she was finally becoming a part of. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't have known, was that someone else had read her story too. Someone who didn't want it published. Someone who knew Jason Crane before he was Jason Crane, and they weren't going to let the past stay buried. The first time Amelia saw the man, she didn't even notice him. He was just another figure in the background of a high-level marketing meeting, tall, suited, polished like the rest. But when he introduced himself, something in Jason's expression shifted. "Gabriel Lang," he said, offering his hand, "special consultant for media reputation strategy. Jason and I go way back, way back." That phrase stuck with Amelia. She glanced at Jason, expecting a nod, maybe a polite confirmation. But instead, Jason just gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes," he said, "we do." Later that day, she asked him about it. Not directly, just a casual question in the elevator. "That guy, Gabriel, you've worked with him before?" Jason was quiet for a moment longer than necessary. "A long time ago," he finally said. "Different life." He didn't elaborate, but Amelia had learned to listen to the weight behind words, and those 3 different life hung heavy in the air. Gabriel didn't leave. Over the next few days, he seemed to be everywhere, at meetings, in strategy sessions, walking the halls like he owned the place. Always pleasant, always observant, but to perfect dot, and always watching her. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but then she noticed it. A glance across the room when her name was mentioned. A polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. The way he paused in doorways just long enough to listen without looking like he was listening. Something was off. One afternoon, as she was gathering her notes from a shared office printer, she noticed a folder sitting near the edge of the table. It wasn't labeled, but she recognized the handwriting on a sticky note inside. Her own pages from her story. Her original draft, the one that was never supposed to leave her desk. Her stomach turned cold. She glanced around. No one. She slipped the folder open just slightly enough to see the familiar lines. Her unedited thoughts. Then a second set of pages, notes, edits, not hers. And then, scribbled in red ink, along the bottom margin of the last page. "She writes like she knows too much. We'll need to contain that." The handwriting wasn't Jason's. She closed the folder and put it back exactly how she found it. The next morning, the email came. Anonymous. Subject line: "You're playing with fire. No body. Just an attachment." She opened it, heart pounding. It was a scanned photo. A younger Jason Crane, barely recognizably, leaning against the hood of a car, flanked by 2 other men. One of them was Gabriel. The photo was time-stamped, 2007. India. Background: a sign, Crane and Lang Investments. Her mind reeled. Jason and Gabriel, partners. She couldn't process it. She needed answers. But when she got to Jason's office, it was empty. She waited. 20 minutes. 30. He didn't return. Instead, Gabriel appeared at her side, smooth as ever. Jason had to step out. He said, "Urgent meeting. I'll be taking point on editorial strategy for now." She froze. "Is that permanent?" she asked. Too quickly, he smiled. "We'll see." That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She read and reread the anonymous email, the picture, the note on her draft. And then the questions started piling up faster than she could answer them. Why had Jason never mentioned Gabriel before? Why was Gabriel really here? And who was trying to scare her into silence? The next morning, the first crack in the surface appeared. An internal memo leaked again, this time suggesting that Amelia's piece was too controversial for official publication, that it might damage stakeholder perception, that an alternative voice might need to reshape the narrative. It was unsigned, but Amelia knew this wasn't just about a story anymore. It was about control, and somewhere behind that glass, someone was rewriting her truth. She found Jason that afternoon, finally back in his office. He looked tired, not his usual polished tired but worn, real, as if something had finally broken through the armor. I saw the photo, she said quietly. He didn't flinch. I know about Crane and Lang. Still, nothing. Then he closed his laptop, slowly, looked her in the eyes, and said, "You deserve the truth." She waited. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the skyline like it held the answers he'd been hiding. 15 years ago, he said, "I wasn't the man you know. I was trying to be someone, anyone. I thought if I built fast and hard enough, I could outrun who I really was." "Gabriel?" she asked. Jason nodded. "He helped me get started, taught me how to win, but not how to live with it." He turned back to her. "We built an empire on leverage, silence, image. I left when I realized the cost was too high. But you never really outrun fire. It always finds you." She understood now. Why he saw something in her. Why he gave her a chance, because once someone had not given him one. And now the past he walked away from was trying to take it all back, starting with her story. Amelia stood. "Then we tell the truth," she said, even louder. Jason met her eyes. There was fire in his now too. "Then you'd better write like your life depends on it," he said, "because it just might." Amelia never expected silence to be this loud. She sat at her apartment window, laptop open, blinking cursor waiting on a blank page. For the first time since this all began, she hesitated, not because she didn't have something to say, but because now she knew exactly how dangerous her words had become. She had spent the last 2 years believing stories changed lives. Now she realized they also threatened them. That night, she started typing anyway. Not the sanitized version, not the corporate-friendly draft. She was done trimming the truth to make it fit within someone else's comfort. This wasn't just a story about office culture or leadership. This was about systems, the invisible machinery behind the polished glass, the kind that chewed up people like her and spat them out with a smile. She called it the architecture of silence, and for the first time, she didn't write like an intern, or an employee, or even a journalist. She wrote like a survivor. By morning, it was 31 pages long. By midday, it had already been read by the editor of Veritas, a rising media platform, known for publishing what no one else would touch. Amelia hadn't sent it. Jason had. "They're interested," he said over the phone, "but they want to speak to you directly, in person." "Why?" she asked. "Because you're not just a writer now," he said. "You're the story." She didn't know how to feel about that, but she went anyway. Veritas operated out of a nondescript building downtown. No logos, no signage. Inside, the energy was sharp. Young journalists at long tables, laptops open, coffee cups everywhere. A battlefield of ideas. Amelia was greeted by a woman named Reva, lean and intense, with storm gray eyes and a voice like flint. "I read your draft," Reva said, skipping introductions. "You're either brave or reckless." Amelia didn't blink. "Maybe both." Reva grinned. "Good, we like that here." They sat in a small meeting room, bare except for a desk and a single lamp. Reva slid the draft forward, tapping the top page. "This hits hard, but you have to understand something. Publishing this doesn't just put pressure on the company, it puts pressure on you. You won't be the whisper in the back of the room anymore. You'll be the voice everyone's pointing at. Are you ready for that?" Amelia took a breath. "I wasn't," she said. But silence didn't save anyone. Reva nodded once. "Then we published." But even before the article went live, the backlash began. That evening, as Amelia returned home, her building's doorman handed her an envelope, no return address. Inside 3 printed screenshots, her original email exchanges with Jason, notes on Gabriel, her personal reflections, things she had never shared beyond her laptop. One sentence was scrawled across the top in red ink. "You're a guest in a house that isn't yours. Start packing." She stared at it, her pulse drumming in her ears. The next morning, she found her email account at work deactivated. No explanation. She showed up at the office anyway. Security stopped her at the front desk. "I work here," she said. "Your clearance was revoked," the guard replied, not unkindly. Amelia didn't flinch. She walked outside, took out her phone, and texted one word to Jason. "They've started." His reply came seconds later. "Then so do we." 2 hours later, the article went live. Within 15 minutes, it had over 20,000 shares. By the end of the day, it was trending globally. The architecture of silence, how power protects itself. From the people who keep it running, people across industry sector and assistants, junior staff began sharing their own stories. Hashtags exploded. Anonymous testimonies flooded message boards. Amelia's voice had become a match, and the fire had caught, but with it came heat. The board of Crane House convened an emergency session. Jason was called in. Media outlets started. Circling investors asked questions, and then Gabriel made his move. The following day, a separate article appeared. This time, from a shadowy media consultancy. The headline was brutal: "Intern or Instigator? The Truth About Amelia Hayes and Her Dangerous Agenda." It included personal photos, school records, even a partially edited video from a security camera taken the night she confronted Jason about Gabriel. The message was clear: discredit her, break her, turn the focus away from the system and back on the individual. Jason called her immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't think they'd go this far." "They're just proving the story was real," she replied. He paused. "There's something else." She waited. "Gabriel has access to files," Jason said slowly. "Files I thought were gone. Things from when we ran Crane and Lang. Contracts, emails. If he leaks them, I lose everything." Amelia's chest tightened. "But if we stop now," she said, "we lose everything." Jason was silent, and then he said, "Meet me tomorrow, off-site, somewhere quiet." They met in an old bookstore tucked between two buildings downtown. It smelled like ink and memory. Jason was already there, leaning against a shelf of biographies. "I have to show you something," he said. From his coat, he pulled out a flash drive. "This contains everything Gabriel is using to control me," he said. "But it also contains something else, proof that he was the one who ran the side deals, that he used our company to launder money through shell contracts." Amelia blinked. "Why haven't you gone public?" "I would have been dragged down with him," Jason said quietly. "But I'm not afraid anymore, not because of me, because of you." She reached for the drive, but Jason didn't let go. "If we do this," he said, "there's no going back." "I never wanted to go back," she replied. He released it, and somewhere outside that bookstore, the city kept spinning. But for the first time, Amelia wasn't running to keep up. She was leading the charge. The message came at midnight. No subject line, no sender name, just a single sentence that felt like a trap set in ink. "You won't like what happens next." Amelia stared at her screen, her heart steady, not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear had already come and gone. It had visited weeks ago, made itself comfortable, and then left when it realized she would no longer be quiet. Now, she was something else entirely. She looked across her living room, where Jason sat on her couch, pale but focused, eyes fixed on the laptop screen. The flash drive he'd handed her earlier now lay between them, small, silent, but heavier than any briefcase he'd ever carried in the corporate world. Inside were decades of secrets, contracts signed with ghost companies, donations routed through fake non-profits, bonuses paid to silence whistleblowers, and, most damning of all, a recording. Jason had made it during one of their last strategy meetings at Crane and Lang, back before the split. Gabriel's voice was clear, calculated, cold. "Everyone has a price. You just have to find the right pressure point." Amelia leaned forward and hit pause. "That's the line," she said. Jason nodded. "That's the line that could take him down." But it wasn't enough. They needed timing, precision, and something stronger than a trending hashtag. "We need to go live," Amelia said. Jason blinked. "You mean like, live live?" "Exactly," she said. "No edits, no chance for spin, no filters, no PR. Just the truth, raw, ugly, human." Jason looked at her for a long moment. "You're not an intern anymore," he said softly. "I was never just an intern," she replied. By dawn, they had a plan. Jason still had connections. Inside the building, real ones. People he hadn't abandoned. people who quietly believed in him. They'd help Amelia get access to the company's internal broadcast system, normally used for quarterly addresses and investor briefings. At exactly 10 a.m., she would have 10 minutes, no more. 10 minutes to expose the truth, 10 minutes to destroy a lie that had built an empire, 10 minutes to remind thousands of people watching across departments and boardrooms that silence was not safety. It was surrender. At 9:45 a.m., Amelia entered the building. Her badge had been deactivated days ago, but the woman at security looked up, saw her, and gave the faintest nod. The elevator opened almost too quickly. Jason was waiting at the executive floor, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a folded note. "For after," he said, passing it to her. "No matter what happens." She nodded and stepped into the broadcast room. The light above the camera turned red. And then silence. No teleprompter, no script. Just Amelia. She looked straight into the lens, heart thudding in her ears, and began. "I was never supposed to be here," she said, not dramatic, not loud, just the truth. "I was supposed to stay quiet, smile in the elevator, carry the coffee, stay small, pause, but I made a mistake. I fell asleep on the wrong shoulder, or maybe the right one." She smiled faintly, because that moment changed everything. Then, she told them, not about herself, but about them, the people watching who had been told they were replaceable, who had learned to swallow truth for a paycheck, who had stopped raising their hands, their voices, their expectations. She showed documents, played the recording. Named names, explained how silence wasn't just encouraged, it was weaponized. Outside, phones buzzed, desks stilled, boardrooms fell quiet, and then just before the feed cut, she looked into the lens one last time. "My name is Amelia Hayes," she said, "and I believe stories don't just inform, they ignite." The screen went black. 10 minutes. That was all it took. The fallout was immediate. By noon, media outlets were swarming the building. By 2, internal audits had begun. By the end of the day, Gabriel Lang's name was scrubbed from the company website. Legal teams scrambled. Shareholders demanded answers. But more importantly, people began to speak. Emails poured in. "I've seen it too. Thank you for giving us words. You reminded me I wasn't crazy." A movement began, not just inside Crane House, but beyond, across cities, offices, industries. And as the dust settled, Jason found Amelia standing on the rooftop of the building where it all began. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She looked out at the skyline, the place that once overwhelmed her. "No," she said, "because they wanted me to be quiet, and I wrote louder instead." He smiled, then handed her the letter she hadn't opened yet. She unfolded it slowly. Inside, Jason had written just one line. "You didn't fall asleep on the wrong shoulder. You just woke up in the right world." And for the first time, Amelia Hayes, once an exhausted intern, once a girl with a worn leather bag and aching feet, looked at the future, not as something to survive, but as something she was finally ready to shape.